Welcome everyone to the sixth session here of the Kinetyca GTM podcast. Today we have Tim Yakubson, and he is the founder of a GTM implementation and educational company, and he will tell us a lot about what is happening these days in the GTME space. So hi Tim, how are you doing today?
Hey David, all good. Absolute privilege to be on here today.
Fantastic. Thanks for taking the time. So, first of all, you do implementation and education. Where do you think are you more actually these days?
Yeah, so my idea behind doing both the implementation side and the education side is to not leave the money on the table, because I find that a lot of the time companies come to us and they want to book a done for you service, yet they may not have the budget to afford an agency, so they will have to settle for a freelancer, for example, or someone that may not be as competent at implementing it. So I find that by giving ourselves the platform to do it for them or to give them the educational resources, any companies that are not yet ready to get the stuff implemented, we can just say, okay, we'll give you a few free courses to educate your team. And as soon as they're more solution aware or more problem aware as a result of doing the courses, even if they had no money in the first place, a lot of the time they'll upsell themselves into the agency services. And also on top of that, as I like to be transparent, the profit margins on doing the education side of the business are a lot higher. So naturally, both services balance each other out. And marginally, I'm not spending too much more time on the education side of things because I'm just documenting what I do on the implementation side of the business as well.
I see. It's interesting actually how you combine both parts, because the thing is, I think the persona is like slightly different from one that just wants education and the one that wants implementation. Very often I would say, like, from the revenue perspective as well, right? How do you make sure actually in this case, because I think that the education ones might be smaller, like smaller companies, right? Maybe they even can't afford yet the implementation part, right? So do you have a hard rule? What kind of companies do you work with?
Absolutely. So on the implementation side of the business, we're looking for five main things. So we're first of all looking for a large enough total addressable market. If this
Yeah.
project is somewhat related to doing cold outreach for them, right? If we do some sort of ads integrations or CRM enrichments or something that's more revenue operations focused, that's not a deal breaker. But if they want something outbound focused, we'll look for a large total addressable market, because that way you can send more outreach, you can be in a better position, just mathematically speaking, to get them an ROI in return for the money that they're spending on us. So that's what we're looking for. We typically look at the ticket prices as well. So if your average sale is below $3,000 or so, it's not something that we can give you an ROI based on. So that's a common one as well. And then on top of that, we're making sure that we work with companies that have a product market fit, or they sell something where their sales cycle is quite short as well. Because as I'm sure you can relate, David, on your agency side, a lot of the time when companies come in with no social proof and they're selling like a Chrome extension or random plugin, it's very hard to actually give them ROI for that. So I'm quite lucky in that sense that we don't just take on every client. Now we try to be a lot more selective.
Yeah, I think this is the typical thing, like for every agency at the beginning, right? Where they have to take clients which might not be the best fit at the beginning, but then they can be more selective. And it's, of course, it's super important actually to be more selective, because, as you're saying yourself, outbound doesn't work for everyone, right? Or when we look at all the different channels that we have, right? When you look at content, outbound, ads, SEO, right? Like, some work better for ones than the others, and it's like super important to be transparent about this, right? And I think this is actually like an interesting thing when we look at the agency development, and especially like small companies that they might get a lot into, is when they talk with agencies and they say, oh, we guarantee you this and this, and you have 5,000 leads like next week in your account, and do the whole thing. Because the problem is here, and this is actually something that is even encouraged by some gurus, let's say, in the agency space, to say, hey, if you're very small, you have to give all different kinds of guarantees in order to lure them in. Then these companies, they start the working with them, they realize, they are not able to deliver. They don't understand anything that we are doing. They cannot actually promise this. They cannot actually deliver at all. And then they are unhappy, and then they leave the agency, and then they say all agencies are just scammers, basically, right? Yeah. So it's interesting actually to look at this when you understand like a little bit the flow there, but I think it's like very difficult sometimes for clients, right, in this space.
I think one big challenge as well is a lot of the time when people say the word agency, it's used very interchangeably with just the term freelancer. So it's very hard to
Yeah.
distinguish and tell the difference between, is it just a one man band like a couple of years ago when it was literally just me doing all the back end, all the front end, like literally everything end to end? Or is it actually a team that has like standard operating procedures? They have some sort of understanding of what they're actually doing. So a lot of the time, yes, you burn your money with one agency, you may burn it with another, but it's just basically you're taking a bet, similar to how you're taking a bet on a specific new hire within your sales team. So as you pointed out, David, yeah, same page on that.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about the big topic that everyone right now is talking about. So we are recording this in June 26th, and there's a lot happening on the go-to-market space, right? Since a few months, all the former Clay agencies, maybe not all of them, but I would say like for sure 90%, over 90%, have moved into the Claude game, right? And like really have enhanced and changed the operations there. What's your take on this? Do you think this is like a good direction right now or not so much?
I think there will be hyped up trends. So if we look at 2024, Clay was the big thing. Clay is still the big thing, but now it's the big thing for mid-market and enterprise companies because I know they're pushing their marketing efforts more into that direction. And the agency owners and like lead gen bros, as a lot of the time they'll be known, are typically focused on Claude Code now. There is also OpenClaw and there is Hermes agents, which a lot of agencies use interchangeably as well. My personal take on it is you would mainly use those technologies instead of Clay only because of the cost comparisons. Because simply put, Clay is just like this central heart, this like the center, like the heart and the brain of the operation, which connects a lot of different tools via APIs. And what we're basically doing is we're switching the Clay subscription, which would cost $200 or $300. We're switching that, getting rid of that, and replacing it with Claude, OpenClaw, Hermes Agent, or whatever else, in theory. However, apart from the cost comparisons, there are a lot of things that you lose out on if you choose those instead of Clay. So there are always going to be like upsides, downsides, but the main reason is there is a lot of hype created. So a lot of people are looking for people that already know Claude Code right now to be
Yeah.
implemented. And it's just a lot cheaper when it comes to the cost of the implementation and the cost of actually running those campaigns in the background as well.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I think one thing that many people are missing in this conversation is that, yes, of course, you can, in theory, rebuild a lot of it, or even if you're very good at the development, most of it, let's say, with Claude Code, OpenClaw, etc. But at the same time, Clay provides you a certain stability, a certain framework that is like really well tested and bulletproof in all the different parts and of the operation. And it makes sense in a way that they moved now to more to the enterprise sector, right? The whole pricing, everything has changed now to be more attractive actually for the enterprise side, because the enterprise side, for them, compliance is a huge thing, right? Every new tool that they want to get into their system is like a huge operation in a corporate. And Clay knows this. And so the thing is that the way how they are set up is they make it easier for corporates. And so this way gives the corporates much more ability to get into all the different tools and to really being able to use the advantages of all these different tools which they couldn't get normally, right? But the thing is that, yes, you could rebuild this, but now try to go to a corporate and say, hey, we can set everything up in Claude, no problem. We just put in all the APIs, connect everything through this, but they just don't have any idea what is actually happening, what is flowing from where to where. Nobody really understands this internally there, right? So I think this is actually something that works very nicely if you have technically advanced companies which are a little bit more bold in their decision making, right? We have clients that want this, right? That want really the whole Claude operation, the whole Claude brain running internally, understanding everything, being connected to every part of the system and going everything through APIs. But at the same time, this is not something that can be done with every company, right? And I think this is something that sometimes gets a bit lost in the conversation. I mean, at least that's my experience. I don't know if you have another experience here.
Yeah, I think looking at where all of these tools like Claude Code are hyped up right now, we're talking about LinkedIn, which is always overhyping tools, and YouTube, where it's a lot of people that are trying to sell you courses or communities or whatever it is in most cases. So it's in their interest to tell you that it's the next big thing. However, from my experience, whenever we speak to companies with more than 50 employees or 100 employees, as you pointed out, it's very hard to get the security clearance from like compliance, legal, or whatever other random team for this company to implement Claude Code, OpenClaw, not even talking about Hermes, because that's a huge security risk like all over the place, right? So in from my experience so far, from my previous conversations, I think Clay is there to stay for companies with over 100 employees for sure. It's just a really good thing to switch to, and like you definitely should be using Claude Code for a lot of the back end work, especially if you are in the lead generation space or if you have some sort of GTM agency. But in-house for companies, I don't see any of these tools work anytime soon, because as I'm sure you realized, a lot of the time you set certain things up, then you need to reconnect the MCP server or whatever it is. No company will ever trust you with that many different logins to be put in place. So I think overall, the fact that most Clay agencies have left the space and they left the conversation and they're closer associated to Claude Code than Clay, that's a huge opportunity in itself. I think for anyone watching this, they should 100% just go big on Clay, master Clay, learn it, learn like the top 1% features, like the new audiences integration, the new ads integration, that kind of thing, how to synchronize Clay with your CRM of choice. And those are like niche, more standout offers and features that 99% of Clay users would not be able to nail. So at the very least, like if I was giving someone a bit of advice, that would be that. Just focus on those newest features that just came out over the last couple of months. And I think that's where the market is definitely going to be a lot more beneficial for anyone breaking into the GTM space.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. It's branching out. It's into different segments, and yes, there are the opportunities that you mentioned, right? Like really double down even on the Clay part right now. And I think one of the reasons also like why everybody's jumping this Claude part, it's like the waves, right? We had like last year actually N8N, for example, was the thing. Like you had everywhere, all around these N8N flows on LinkedIn all the time. And all the time the posts, hey, you can fire your whole marketing team. Hey, you can fire your whole sales team. You just need these few N8N flows. And it's honestly, at some point it was really annoying me so much. RIP lead generation agencies.
Yeah, there are a few. So for context, I spent the last 2 or 3 weekends trying to get on top of all the OpenClaw stuff. We set up OpenClaw in-house. We implemented it relatively successfully in-house on the agency side of the business. We tried with Hermes Agent as well. I was so frustrated with it because it took me forever, because the main promise of Hermes Agent, for those people that don't yet know, it's the fact that it's self-improving. So you don't need to tell it to save a skill, or you don't need it to tell to remember something. You will always basically remember your next session. And like in the next session, you will always remember historical stuff and all the previous conversations. And it's the most frustrating thing, having to learn all of these tools every single month. But I do think overall, like it's not about falling for the shiny object syndrome. It's more focusing on the principles that remain the same in sales, which is, hey, you build a company list, this is how to enrich it, this is how to qualify it, and this is what GTM is, right? So if you holistically understand go-to-market, I think that's the first skill that you need to acquire before you consider all these flashy automation, enrichment, or whatever other AI tools that are trending in the market right now.
Yes, 100%. The fundamentals are more important than ever. But look, even for us that we are really in this space, like for us, we have to learn so many things all the time that are coming on the market. I dare even to imagine how it is like for a normal, let's say in quote unquote, head of sales that is in a company and has to really see through all the forest and try to understand, okay, what really makes sense, what doesn't make sense, right? Yes.
I've seen quite a lot on that topic, David. I've seen quite a lot of heads of sales right now looking for just one master, like single source of truth where they can stay on top of all of these trends. Because I've spoken to quite a few VPs of sales of Series A to Series D startups, and most of the time they're like, look, like we trust this one specific newsletter. We just read just that one little thing because there is so much noise on LinkedIn. And a lot of the time, whenever they book in calls with myself, for example, is because half of the conversation is around, hey, our tech stack is ZoomInfo or Cognism and whatever. We know it's very old school. How do you recommend to make it better? So I think a lot of it is like a large benefit of this business model of running an agency or anything of that sort is to develop some sort of thought leadership on LinkedIn first, because that's how you attract that inbound interest, and that's how you win that credibility from some of these dudes that read your content and then they're like, hey, I want to speak to this guy. And then that's when you can have a sales opening to pitch your agency or education or whatever it is. But I do think I have seen that being a big problem, because a lot of people just come to you and they're like, where should I start? Claude Code. What do they even do? What's the difference? Is it all the same company? Because OpenClaw sounds the same as Claude Code and Clay. Right? Is it all the same company? And people are just absolutely mind blown. So I do think, at the very least, like being in the education space now, I think there is a huge opportunity in just like being associated with just one mainstream tool like that and just teaching it to like the 99% of people that have no idea what it is in the first place. Because that gap is huge between people that heard of the tool and between the people that actually know it well enough to use it day to day as well.
Yeah, so very interesting topic. It has become really difficult to find good go-to-market engineers, and for us, the hiring has been more complex. We have more rounds in between right now before we decide on the right GTM engineers in the interview process. And the thing is, the market has been flooded really with people that are just beginning and starting the space, right? So there are many juniors. One thing that we realized is that for every company it's different. The thing is that we do go-to-market systems, right? So yes, we have some classical outbound companies, let's say like clients that do the classical outbound, but in many cases it's like more intricate, right? It's like more connected with the CRM. We have more complicated flows there in the whole setup, and so the knowledge is often deeper that we need for the go-to-market engineers. And regarding your question, if we divide this, so one way how we are dividing this is right now that we have go-to-market engineers which are more on really understand Clay very well, and on the other side we have ones which are more AI development focused, right, which have really clear coding skills, clear development skills, and are more on this side. And so that's the way how we see this. Of course it's great to have ones which cover the whole spectrum, but since it has become so wide right now, the area of knowledge that you need to have, it just makes sense to divide it in a way. How are you handling this on your side?
So I was very lucky with my initial hires. My theory has always been that it's best to onboard anyone to a role in person. So I started off by trying to hire in London, where obviously the starting salaries are way higher, which is the obvious downside. But I got much better talent at the very start. I was very lucky to come across Cadian Anderson. He is now working as a GTM engineer at Apollo, but he was my GTM engineer over the last year or so. He has now left my agency. He's joined Apollo as one of the founding GTMEs there. And I think the obvious downside of hiring in wherever you live, like if you live in Europe, is that the cost will be far higher. But what I find is if someone has a basic sales background of like being in an SDR role or an AE role, they're fluent and like articulate in English, you are going to have to pay a premium, right? So essentially it's always a matter of having a trade-off between, do you hire someone who, you can put in front of clients, or do you have to hire someone who has the technical skill set, but you will never put them in front of a client, right? Especially on the agency side of things. And I spoke to Michelle from Code IQ, and he mentioned that in their case, they hire a mix of both. So as senior GTM engineers, they put anyone that basically has the skill set, the sales acumen, and who they can present to clients. And then on the other side, the people that do a lot of the back-end work, they're like junior GTM engineers. They may not be articulate, they may not be that eloquent in the way that they speak, but they basically just hire them for a bit cheaper, I assume, and they do the back-end fulfillment as well. That's more or less the model that I'm trying to figure out myself on my side as well. I'm still going for hires within Europe. So right now I have some people across Portugal. I've got a few in the UK as well, but we're not really, like a lot of the back-end stuff is in Pakistan as well, but it really depends on what trade-off do you want to make essentially, if that makes sense. Have you had much luck with hiring in Pakistan, by the way? Because I know it's a huge hub for GTM talent right now.
A lot, actually, a lot. And I have to say, I have made a little bit different experiences when it comes to this. So first of all, actually, we So when it comes to the locations, we have hired all across the globe as well. We actually don't really have a change in salary for people that are, let's say, like somewhere in Western Europe or in Asia, because the people that we are looking for, maybe it's because of the skill set that we are looking for really highly skilled people. And the thing is, it actually doesn't even matter if they are in Pakistan, India, London, or wherever. They can just demand prices, and we're also happy to pay them like these prices, that because of the how highly skilled they are, basically. So that's that, right? And then for us, it's, yes, you have on one side, you have people that are more client facing, but we are dividing this actually, like where we like the customer success side and GTM strategist kind of side. Like this role is like different kind of names, right? But so this is like more the client facing side, but then the real engineers, they don't really have to be so much in front of the clients. It's just a different skill set, right? But I haven't made like the experience from the payment structure, at least these days. Maybe this was different in the past, or maybe it's because we are just so picky with the people that we hire. Yeah, but that's just our experience.
I think one thing with GTM engineering is the fact that it's such like a made up title, because essentially Clay just popularized it a couple of years ago when Clay was the thing. So I think since then, now everyone is expecting to be paid anywhere from like $2,000 up to $10,000 a month, whereby some of them just put it on their headline that they know N8N and Clay and Claude Code and stuff. So it's very hard to screen out the bad talent. But my hack so far has always been that, first of all, I never rely on inbound job postings, because I think they always attract the worst crowds that are looking for jobs in the first place. So I tend to go outbound. And apart from going outbound, I also look for agencies that I look up to in the space. So there are a couple of agencies that, some of the OG agencies like Code IQ or Stack Optimize or whatever, they're fishing in the same talent pool more or less as where I am in most cases. And then the other thing that I'm sure you probably do as well, like the first screening question that we have for anyone that, to who we send this like code outreach pitching them a GTM engineer role, we always in the code outreach say, hey, if you want to apply, just send me a Loom video, just going through any random play table or any random thing that you've worked on GTM related. And the idea is just to see their thinking, even if it's like, you can be as random as, hey, just go visit a random company and just analyze the persona that they sell to, the pain points that this company solves, the kind of process that you can build for them using various tools, and a couple of campaign ideas. From that alone, you can tell the sales acumen of a person, right? And you can tell if there will be a cultural fit, if they can speak without you needing like subtitles, right? That kind of thing. So at the very least, that's my experience, but my team is not the biggest, right? Like we have 6 people full-time right now. And I'm not really, like, my plan is not to scale to like millions, right? It's just to have a consistent pipeline, both on the agency side and the education side, and just keep the quality without a lot of churn that a lot of big agencies would face otherwise. I'm not sure though, on your side, David, have you, like, what are your goals on the agency side in the short term, in the long term, in terms of, it could be like client numbers, revenue, whatever it is. How do you quantify it, and how do you see the next year versus the next 3 years of working on it?
Yeah, so on our side, we are concentrating completely on the system building part, actually. And we thought, like from the educational perspective, to do this sometimes. And we have clients also where we help them, let's say, in the integration, where we help them, like we create Loom videos, we create documentations, we create the whole setup so that they can learn it, implement this. But we don't have it like as a separate program in our case. So we are just focusing on the system building part. And so we position ourselves as revenue partners of these companies. And because we want to go away just from outbound, right? We don't want to be just in that space. We want to be really clear and say, okay, what can we actually do in order to drive revenue at your company? And outbound might be one of them, but it might be also content, it might be ads, it might be like optimizing the flows in your CRM right now, getting more from that. It might be ABM, right? So there are different kind of parts here. And so this is the way how we position ourselves as a company actually these days. And yeah, so one thing that would be actually interesting for me to know is, so when we come to setting up these flows in our companies, we talked about Hermes before, we talked about OpenClaw, we talked about Claude, and now there is the possibility to create like the whole infrastructure on your side, right? Basically everything, or you have these layers in between as well, which you can use, right? Some people say, you cannot really rebuild a SaaS product, right? Because yes, you could vibe code it, but then there are all these issues and problems, all these bugs that come, and you cannot really come there. On the other side, you could say also it serves a different purpose, right? I don't have hundreds and thousands of users there, but maybe I just have the 10, 20, 30 clients that I'm handling with. And there it works very well because it's just not set up for this huge infrastructure. Where are you on the spectrum? Do you see, hey, I still want to have very clear, like all the intermediate layer there with all the different SaaS companies, or do you lean towards building more and more yourself?
So I think if we zoom back and zoom out of the entire landscape of all of these GTM tools, if we follow the trends all the way back to Zapier, God knows how many years ago, right? And if you look at there was Zapier, there was Make.com, then there was NA10, then now we have all of these Claude Code, all of these products. And now Claude released Claude Routines probably about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago now. If you follow each individual trend, you will just be rebuilding the entire business based on this new tool before the next shiny object comes around 6 months later, and you'll have to rebuild it from scratch every single time. So on my side, I went through a lot of switching in the first 2 years up until probably the summer of last year. And since the summer of last year, we've still got a lot of the back-end stuff inside of NA10. So it's a self-hosted NA10 account. In my opinion, it's robust enough to carry us internally when it comes to internal operations with most of the stuff that we're doing. And yes, we would use Claude Routines or Claude Code for specific use cases and so on. But I would say, as a grand rule, as our main rule of thumb now, we're not trying to jump on the next hyped up topic. We still keep operationally, we use NA10 for all the cloud hosted stuff. Sometimes we would use Zapier for basic setups, like my notifications and random stuff like that, where I know I can set it up myself faster than delegating it internally. But I try not to spread myself beyond that. So we use Claude Code probably for 60% of the building stuff that we're doing. NA10 is just for internal operations. And then, we just use a couple of other tools interchangeably, but not so much that if a new thing comes over, like Hermes Agent, for example, I'm not really relying on Hermes Agent for anything. Although I'm about to put out a new course covering Hermes Agent. Same with OpenClaw. I've played around with them. I use them in-house a bit, but I'm not using them fully holistically. My life does not depend on it. The business doesn't really depend on those tools. But I'm not sure, David, on your side, do you have a bias where internally you use just a specific automation platform, or do you just mix them all together?
Yeah, we are still mostly working on Clay, but we have with Claude also an infrastructure in the background where we have basically every one of our clients gets their own tab repo, right? Where we organize the clients in. And some of the automations are in the background also with N8N. Yes, when it comes, for example, getting the information from the calls, right? Getting the information from the Google Drive and syncing it continuously into this. And when we create the whole backend, right? When we try to understand the persona, the ICP, the offers, etc., all this, we created a flow, how these files get created based on all the background information that we have. So this is the architecture. And then a lot of the day-to-day is running to Clay, but we are always, exactly, to Clay. Now, but we're always asking ourselves, can we do this operation actually with Claude? Could we simplify this part? Can we create a new skill around this part or on that part, right? But I'm sure the thing is with these skills that it's great to create a million different skills for all the different use cases, but you have to manage them as well. You have to make sure that they don't stale, that actually when one person uses a skill, then another person uses the skill, that they don't create completely different kind of results, right? And then you have some skills which are just MD files, but then there are other setups where you have actually real code running in the backend, right? And now the governance, the operation of this is actually really the much more difficult part, I would say. It's not just, hey, yeah, I can create skills for this and this. Fantastic. Good. You can do this. You can just tell Claude to do this. Hey, use this MCP, use these API connections here, create me a skill, and Claude will do it. But then actually to having really operational, it reminds me much more actually from my software development days, how it used to be with tracking, with push-pull, and really clear change management and tracking there. How are you solving this on your end actually?
To be honest, so we have numerous attempts to solve it. So far, we tried to create like a mission control dashboard, which I'm sure you would have seen on YouTube and all over the place, whereby you centralize all of the crons, all the different like updates to specific skills and stuff. You can push it into a nice like UX dashboard that you can set up, again, using Claude Code. And in theory, it gives you the transparency into what skills you have, how often you update them, how you update them, and you can schedule like Claude routines that automatically populate this dashboard with the updates and blah, 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 and that kind of thing. However, in terms of practicality, whenever you have 6 different users or 10 different users using the same skills, as you pointed out, you naturally need to rely on each individual person just having a GitHub like backup every single week. So I think we run it like every Friday or something. And every single person has to basically push their like all of their GitHubs, all of their like repository stuff into GitHub. And then that way, like every month or whenever we review and just have a look, okay, has anyone got new skills to share? And then we have to share it internally. Still, that data governance is very similar to what CRM data governance is in bigger mid-market enterprise companies, whereby there is a degree of like, there is a lack of scalability behind it. There comes a point at which you're thinking, hey, why has this proposal got a different UX to this proposal? Like, how could that happen? And it does happen to the best of us. I think everyone is trying to figure that out. That's why a lot of companies now are relying on these AI, like middlemen, essentially. And I'm sure we can call out a bunch of companies that are trying to solve these challenges of like centralizing the skills and helping with the transparency and stuff, but they're just basically taking a 20% margin for creating a dashboard for you in most cases. So I think for the time being, the technology is just not really there. But if we have this conversation in 6 months' time, it will probably be a lot easier to get all of that stuff sorted, especially about when someone updates all of those skills and things. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, definitely. I think this is something that everybody is right now finding their own solutions. Like the same thing, like on the Claude harness, right? Like, what is the folder structure? How do you organize this? How do you do the flows? I think everybody has really their own setup here. It's very interesting in a way how it has evolved, the whole thing. And as I mentioned before, like I feel like I'm like somehow drawn back to my software development times, where you like it has really much more fragmented and more complex in a way. And Clay came across, right? And before that, like for cold email, you had the tools where you could, like even before Instantly and Smartly, right? You couldn't send out that much. You could send out hundreds of emails over one email account. The flows were much simpler there, right? And yes, you had Zapier and people had their connections. Then Clay comes on into the picture and gives you much more, many more possibilities, but at the same time, also the complexity increases, right? And now it feels like, we have Git. I have to use GitHub again. Actually, this whole, it's so funny actually, like because it's like something that we had to use now, obviously, and it makes sense. But I haven't been using it for years. I didn't have to commit any code for years now. But now, of course, like with Claude, how it has changed in the last months, last half a year, something like all this has become, again, super important. But what I want to say with this, it's funny how it's going like more back to the roots in a way. Maybe this is just a transition, right? And we will come at some point again to another abstraction layer, and actually we will not see this at all anymore. We will not think about it and changes and commits and all these things. But it's just a thought, right? How things are becoming like more and more and more granular again, and then the abstraction layers are changing. It's like it's crazy how things are just merging from one side to the other.
But one thing I've noticed as well, which I'm sure will probably be quite a big thing by the time that this episode is out, is the Clay integration with Claude Code that I've been a beta tester on. I'm not sure if you played around with that already as well on your side, but I do think that it has the potential to move out this layer of you thinking about different API keys and that kind of thing. Of course, in that case, you are paying a 20, maybe 40% markup to Clay. So you could just do and connect all these APIs directly into Claude Code yourself. But from what I've seen so far, because I got it shared, like I think I was one of the first 5 or 10 people to play around with it, it's insane. You can, like in summary, you just prompt Claude Code. You call Clay essentially with a trigger word, which I can't say publicly right now, apparently. I got told I can't say it just yet. And then as soon as you call Clay, basically can build you the exact tables using the sculptor functionality. You can even tell it like a template in theory that you can build it on. You can plug everything in, give it to you for review in a CSV format or in a table format first. After you approve a couple of leads, you can basically then build the rest of it as well. So it's super user friendly. I think that has the potential to remove a lot of the friction, but again, it will come at a markup of a certain percentage, right? Which is again the reason that a lot of people are shifting away from Clay. But I think for those enthusiasts behind the GTM tools, honestly, like that Clay Claude Code integration, I'm buzzing. Like I was recording stuff about it recently, and I was like, wow, I want to spend some time playing around with that over the weekend.
Yeah, this is fantastic. This really opens doors for sure, like when it comes to this. And at least now all the companies that have shifted or adapted to the cloud space have at least already the infrastructure that they can then use here, right? How is it actually with other layers in between, like Cargo? Have you tried Cargo, for example, before, like instead of Clay?
Yeah, I've done quite a few posts for Cargo because I know they've got a lot of really cool workflows that I've played around with in the past. To be totally honest, since I'm closely associated with Clay and I rely on their brand, for that reason I find it quite difficult to try out other tools and comment on other tools in the category, simply because I don't want to lose that connection. I want to be associated with the Clay brand. I think Cargo has something good going for them, but I think if it competes with Clay or if it positions that as a Clay alternative, I don't really know anyone else. I think it's a one-horse race to compete with Clay, and Clay will come out on top most of the time. So it's more like I have no doubt that their functionality is great. My only question is, do you think that they can, like, who is their target audience? Is it people that are scared of entering Clay? Or what's your take on that? Because I think you would have played around with Cargo a lot more.
Yeah, I think Cargo is actually the idea behind this, as far as I've seen, is that you can interact with Claude even more and you have more CLI kind of functionality. And basically this, what Clay now says that they will be doing, or that will be out soon, right? But it answers also a few other questions, right? You have also a database in the background that you can fill differently than you can do with tables, because it's like more like a Supabase kind of setup. And it's just the communication there, which is faster and simpler, right? Where you break down different place and functions, right? And from there you go. I think it's super interesting. The thing, like, we have been thinking about like implementing it, and maybe we might, like, at least partially. But it's always the problem that you have here. Of course, we can be much more open than let's say like a corporate, for which is very difficult with the implementations. But for us, it's actually not a security question or a compliance question. The question that it is then, do we actually want to rely on another integrator, on another, as you mentioned before, that there are like these different tools that help you with the dashboards, etc. Right? Like, do you want to really have to learn the new functionalities and then rely on them, or do you just go more into this? Hey, I really want to build it by myself and be less reliant on these middle layers in between, right? Yeah, this is something that we have to see.
I mean, one thing, quick disclaimer, I actually mistaken Cargo for Flocker because Flocker positions itself as a Clay alternative. To be honest, I'm playing around with so many tools because I have a YouTube channel dedicated to a lot of these tool tutorials. So sometimes when we talk about these tools, if they sound anything like a SaaS company, like this like AI sounding name, straight away like I can get lost in those. But I played around with Flocker, which is basically like a Clay alternative, and Freckle, which I'm sure you would have heard of as well. Again, I can see like it's a bit more simpler than Clay, but I don't think that there is as much of a market for those kind of tools as there is for Clay, because Clay has a brand recall behind them. I'll actually try out Cargo because I do think I would have plugged it into Claude Code before, but I experiment every month. I get a bunch of free trials and offers, and I'm sure you get the same on your side, to see which tools you want to use for your agency. I probably would have used them, but to be honest, maybe it was a colleague of mine or something of that sort. I do think the GTM space overall right now is just overly saturated with these sales tools. I honestly find that for me, at least, to stay sane, the main thing is to just dedicate like 20-30 minutes a week maybe, or every couple of weeks, to researching these tools and signing up and trying them out, but not necessarily just like paying for it straight away until there is a specific niche use case. Otherwise, your bills stack up. You have to do a lot of sponsored posts, as I'm sure for LinkedIn and stuff, in return for using some of these tools with preferential pricing. But it's a crazy landscape. I don't know how anyone can stay sane with it, especially if you're like trying to break into the space. So how do you stay sane, David? How do you stay on top of all of these updates and stuff?
You have to make a decision. For sure. You have to decide, okay, which you really look into, which you don't look into, because I mean, 100%, it's just too much. It's just too much out there, even for us, where we do this professionally. It really doesn't make sense to look in every different tool, new technology, new setup that is out there. So we have to decide always, okay, does it really bring something new into the picture? Is this just hype? Is this really solving like a new use case? Right. And yeah, so that's the thing, right? I think it's also like with a big change in the market, these things gets a little bit more relevance in a way, right? Like, for example, like we had the pricing change on Clay, and obviously this made that the other tools, which are like direct competitors, in a way have gained another traction as well, and maybe they have the use cases from that perspective as well, right? So I think that's the natural thing, but it always goes in waves, right? And you have to see, okay, what is it that really makes sense? And this brings me actually to the last question that I would like to tackle with you today is, how do you see, what is your prediction when it comes to the development of the GTM space this year, next year, and beyond right now? What are the things that you can see where we are moving at?
From now, so talking June 2026, going into 2027, 2028, I think primarily the biggest shift will be moving away from individual tools that are used through the UI and the UX, in a sense of logging in and having to go into settings to import leads, export CSVs, that kind of thing. I think it will completely move away from any of that manual activities, like topping up campaigns, creating campaigns, doing that button by button. I think it will come to a point where it's 80%, maybe 90% purely agentic. And what that means is you have your headquarters. This can be in the form of Claude Code or OpenClaw, whatever it is. Most likely Claude Code, because OpenClaw doesn't have a user interface in a lot of cases. I think it will just be a matter of you have a UI where you explain something in plain English. All the API keys are configured automatically, similar to how they are with Claude Code right now. And then all you need to do is just explain to it the actual thinking, and then the leverage becomes your actual sales acumen or your GTM acumen, rather than now knowing how to configure the different APIs, what MCP service to use, and that kind of thing. So my biggest prediction, which is probably like common sense for most people, but that it will shift into that to become fully agentic, whereby the role of what like virtual assistants used to do a year ago or 2 years ago, they're already vanishing now. Right, so I don't think that it's going to be a matter of you needing to configure APIs and stuff. I think MCPs will become way better. It will be a lot easier to connect tools without any code or anything of that sort. And I do think there will be, like, the biggest selling points will be the sales acumen, the GTM acumen, which comes from experience, which you can't just buy through a course or that kind of thing, in my opinion. So yes, you can learn tools, and I think in the meantime you should be staying on top of all of these GTM tools. But more or less, it will just be fully down to your acumen, which, again, it's super hard to measure. So it's going to be increasingly hard to hire that GTM talent.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that it will go in this direction for sure. One thing that I just ask myself is, you have the people that, because if you think about it this way, then it sounds a bit like command line. I just speak with it like in natural language, and then everything happens in the back end, and I'm not even aware about this, right? In a way, it feels more human, but on the other hand, people are so used to these interfaces. I think where I have on the left side, I see my menu, and I can choose between them, and then another page pops up, another page pops up and shows me where everything is. I think we are very used to this kind of interaction since the last, I don't know, like 20, 30, 40 years, since let's say since the last 30 years, like in the 90s, I think this became more bigger. Before that, it was like more command line based, right? But people are so used now to these graphical interfaces that I'm wondering if this might be also a friction in adopting to this, if this will be really so easy. Or maybe you have like really just the main interface, or maybe the interfaces actually get created on the go, right? So let's say I'm chatting right now with Claude, and then it just pops up with graphics and things. In a way, it is already happening like this, but much slower, right? But maybe it could be like, really, okay, here's now your whole database, and here's how the campaigns are going, and out of nothing, then graphs get created right away, instantly, right? Maybe this might be a way how this evolves. What do you think about this?
Yeah, to be honest, it's a weird one because I think the way that it's heading right now, you probably wouldn't like the actual user face of these like chatbots because they all look the same, right? Claude, ChatGPT, they all have the same user interface more or less now. You just prompt it and it just goes through all of that. I think that's here to stay probably for the next couple of years. Similar with how like all the software tools basically are the same now, right? Like you sign up, you log in, it's the same like sign up flow. The panel is exactly the same of like accounts and then campaigns and stuff. It's all set up like in a very similar manner. So I do think like the UX is here to stay, the one that we already have. It's just all the back-end activity of like the code and the bash commands that you still need to approve, all of that stuff. I think that will go. And also worth noting that a lot of the time now, I only found this out a couple of weeks ago, but whenever you use any of these AI wrappers, they pay 20%, any AI tool that you're using on a day-to-day basis that has AI in their functionalities, they're paying 20% of the money that you're paying them directly to NVIDIA, right? Or directly to whatever, Claude as well, probably another 20% or 30%. So overall, they are basically at the same margins as a service data provider because they don't really have that much intellectual property beyond just using the chip and the AI models to just become like a specialist at a specific skill that you wanted to perform. So I'm super big right now on just trying to build everything myself because otherwise you're just giving away 20% margin here and there for all of these random tools. And a lot of them are not trained on the right kind of like GTM acumen. And no AI really has like common sense thinking. So regardless, it's either you train it or someone else trains it for you, right? So it boils down to the same basics as where we were at like 5 years ago or 2 years ago with ChatGPT. So yeah, that's just a final take on that.
Yes. Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense for sure, Tim. I couldn't agree more. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts here on this topic, for being here with us on this podcast and discussing where GTM engineering is heading these days.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, David. It was a great conversation.
Thank you. And for the listeners out there, if you are interested on GTM engineering topics, feel free to listen to these podcasts. We talk about them all the time. And feel free to subscribe to our newsletter as well, where we discuss also what are the newest trends right now on GTM engineering. Thank you very much. See you. Bye.